think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Piers. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something. Right. And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that are being passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I am all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting. You know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When you
it
say
can't
you
get any more
support
obvious.
some of these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. But sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, Labour...
Sadly, what you would expect from Suella Braverman, who has a history of just deliberately saying inflammatory things for the sake of headlines. So I don't think we should take seriously her comments.
Does Labour really care about Islamist extremism? Talking of extremism...
He has no proof that I'm a threat. Other than that, I was in ISIS.
She's not coming home. Also, remember this guy?
In my name, everyone says this, why are you going back? Right. I want to go back, I need to be clear.
Well, he was the tour manager for this lot, wasn't he? Was he cleared of an £80 million cocaine smuggling charge? Find out a little bit later on. And, well, talking of drugs...
Of course, I had been doing cocaine around this time. At someone's country house.
We will be the only TV channel bringing you reaction from Prince Harry's drugs court case in America. Also... the co-founder of Just Stop Oil wants you to protest outside her house, apparently. She's live here on the show later this hour. On my panel tonight, it is the director of Popular Conservatives. It is, of course, Mark Littlewood. I've got Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju and ex-BBC political chief John Sargent. Oh, and who's in the wrong here?
Not going to propose to me today, are you?
No.
Just in case. It's free.
It's going to say free.
Ooh. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Labour doesn't care about the extreme Islamist threat. That's next.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Our top stories tonight. Police have confirmed 3 children whose bodies were found at a home in Bristol died from knife injuries. 7-year-old Faraz, 3-year-old Jury and 9-month-old Mohammed Bash were found in the Sea Mills area on Sunday. A 42-year-old woman, arrested on suspicion of their murder, remains in hospital and is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries. A vigil is being held in memory of the children tonight. A body recovered from the River Thames has been formally identified as suspected chemical attacker Abdul Izadi. The post-mortem also confirmed the cause of his death was drowning. His former girlfriend and her 2 children were injured in that attack. The 31-year-old is now in a stable condition and no longer sedated, but the Met says officers still have not been able to speak to her. Former Post Office Chief Executive Paula Venables has been stripped of her CBE by the King following the Horizon IT scandal. She was heavily criticised for routinely denying any problems with the system, which led to the wrongful prosecution of hundreds of sub-postmasters. She received the honour in 2018 and announced that she planned to hand it back with immediate effect last month. She'll now formally lose the title for bringing the honours system into disrepute. An unexploded Second World War bomb found in Plymouth has now been successfully taken out to sea, and police say its detonation could be tonight or tomorrow. The 500-kilogram device was found in a garden in Keam and lifted onto a military vehicle. 10,000 residents are now being allowed to return back to their homes following its removal. Local MP Johnny Mercer has thanked emergency responders who worked around the clock. A protest has taken place outside the Home Office following the sentencing of a small boat pilot for manslaughter. Ibrahim Abbar had been piloting the unseaworthy inflatable between France and the UK in December of 2022 when 4 people drowned. Following a retrial at Canterbury Crown Court, Barr was sentenced to 9 years and 6 months. He'd claimed that smugglers threatened to kill him if he refused to steer the boat, but the prosecution said he owed the passengers a duty of care. And Nigel Farage says the 2024 US election affects the safety of the world. The GB News presenter was speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference just outside of Washington, D.C., where he urged delegates to support Donald Trump. He cited the UK's recent pro-Palestine protests and claimed an extremist fringe is now threatening our democracy.
And now we see British politicians cowed, scared. They were even scared to leave the building on Wednesday and Thursday evenings because we've forgotten who we are, we've forgotten what we are, and we've allowed an extremist fringe to bully us and threaten our very democracy. And that is why we need strong leaders. It's why we need leaders of conviction. It's why you in America and we in the world need Trump back in that White House.
Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now let's get back to Patrick.
Extreme Islamists are not here to peacefully coexist with you. They are here to take over. And it should not be controversial to point this out. Suella Braverman today has said this. The truth is that the Islamists, the extremists and the anti-Semites are now in charge. They have bullied the Labour Party, they have bullied our institutions, and now they have bullied our country into submission. Well, the unfortunate fact for Suella Braverman, of course, is that the Conservative government has been in charge for 14 years and we've still ended up in this situation. But look at the direction of travel in Britain. Look at how much of a problem extreme Islamist terrorism is. Look at how many people there are lurking in the shadows with very extreme views, and look at the mob tactics that they are prepared to use to get their way. Why is it that only those on the left don't seem to think that an extreme Islamist takeover is a problem? I've got a few theories. It could be anti-Semitism. It could be that they don't want to admit that their ideology has allowed an extremist Trojan horse into Britain. It could be that they don't actually like Britain very much. They're the ones who seem focused on our historic wrongs and destroying a sense of nationhood and patriotism. It could be, of course, fear of being called a racist. Now, I think most people can see the direction of travel in Britain and most people are concerned about it. But I would argue not these people.
Sadly, what you would expect from Suella Braverman, who has a history of just deliberately saying inflammatory things for the sake of headlines. So I don't think we should take seriously her comments.
Well, that's the woman who may very well be your next Home Secretary saying, in my opinion, that she doesn't really take the threat of extremism that seriously. Step forward, Humza Yousaf with this tweet. Suella Braverman is the worst of politicians, an individual who deliberately stokes the fires of racial and religious tensions for self-serving purposes with no regard to the greater societal damage she is doing. The very definition of a scorched earth policy. Shameful. I don't really think Mr Youssef should try to take the moral high ground when it comes to talking about stoking division. Do you?
Lord Justice Clark, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white.
Obviously, Sadiq Khan has got involved, saying Suella Braverman seems to be doing her best to outflank Enoch Powell. It's a poisonous attempt to drive a wedge between our communities and serve her own naked ambition. Now, more than ever, we should be seeking to unite, not divide. Well, it's the same Sadiq Khan who reportedly said that a white family doesn't really represent Londoners, agreed to hoisting a Donald Trump blimp over central London whilst the US president came and visited. Or for what it's worth as well, Sadiq Khan will never fully shake off his alleged links with extremists. The Times reports that he attended events with Anwar al-Awlaki, who has acted as an al-Qaeda recruiter. Khan also reportedly spoke 9 times alongside Suleiman Ghani, a hardline imam based in the MP's Tooting seat, who, on the night of the Paris massacres, joined a campaign for an Islamic State. Sadiq Khan, of course, denies that he's got any links with extremism. Look, in literally the last couple of days alone, we've had a perfect microcosm of where we're at with this debate. MPs clearly unable to vote the way that they wanted to because of threats, intimidation of politicians, extremists on the streets, mafia-style tactics used, racist, genocidal slogans beamed onto Parliament. So that has happened. And then a former Home Secretary speaks out about it. Then, potentially the future Home Secretary, the leader of Scotland and the mayor of our capital city had all, by about 9 a.m. this morning, smeared her, said that she's talking rubbish and told everybody not to listen to her. And so the cycle continues. Ask yourselves this, OK? Try to imagine Britain in 20 years' time. Do you like what you see? Let's get the thoughts now of my panel. We've got the director of the Popular Conservatives. It is Mark Littlewood. We've also got Apprentice finalist Joanna Chargeau and former BBC political chief John Sargent. Mark, I'll just ask your view on this. Do you think Suella Braverman was too extreme in what she was saying earlier on about the Islamist takeover of Britain?
Little. I think she's got a point. I read her article with interest. I don't really agree with her, though, that Islamists are in charge of Britain now. They are not in charge of Britain now, but I think they have been indulged. The problem is that we are not calling out extremism when we find it. And in public debate in Britain now, it seems to be that the overridingly important thing is nobody must ever be offended, ever. We mustn't cause any offence, and I think we therefore tiptoe around these issues rather than calling them out. In that, she's right. But I don't really blame the Islamists themselves. They're a very small minority. I think the point that she's trying to make is it's the weak-willed majority who are simply unwilling to stand up to these sort of extremists.
Yes, OK. Joanna, I was... well, not really that amazed, because I kind of expected it to happen. But when you see the likes of Yvette Cooper, could well be our next Home Secretary, Humza Yousaf, the leader of Scotland, the mayor of our capital city, all tripping over themselves to completely discredit Suella Braverman and say, you don't need to listen to this woman. Well, that makes me question whether or not they actually take the threat that seriously, especially given the scenes that we saw on Wednesday night, for example.
Well, how can you take it seriously when Suella Braverman uses such inflammatory language? You know, if she actually spoke normally, you know, in a kind of balanced tone, and to say that she's been a minister before, you would think that she would have good practice of that, but she probably said even worse things when she was in that position. How can you take her seriously? You know, she's saying that Islamists are taking over, and I almost feel as if there's a big, you know, she's basically conflating Islamists, as in extreme Islamists, who we all obviously don't support, with just the general Muslim population. I think that's completely wrong. And for her to say, you know, we're sleepwalking into a ghettoised society that threatens free speech. Who's the person who was calling protest for peace in Palestine? Yes, I don't know, you probably say that, you know, there was a mixed group and people were shouting out things.
We'll say that because I was there, to be fair.
Well, yes.
And I experienced it.
But also to call those hate marches, when you've got somebody who tars basically a whole people with one brush, how can you take her seriously when she, you know, she herself is extreme? All
right, well, we'll come back to that. I mean, when it comes to her saying that Islamists are in charge of Britain now, John, that itself might be extreme. I do worry about the direction of travel, though.
Well, you can worry about all these things, but she ought to know from her time in the Cabinet that these are complicated issues. They're not the kind of thing where you can just say, they're all doing this, they're taking over. And to end, as she says, by saying, oh, the fight back must start now if we are to preserve the liberties we cherish and the privileges this country affords us all. If we are to have any chance of saving our country from the mob. Well, I just go back to my own experience as a kid growing up right after the war, rationing, the difficulties we had, the pollution, the 4-minute warning we thought we'd get for nuclear attack by the Russians, the IRA campaign, which nearly killed 2 of our prime ministers, Margaret Thatcher and John Major. The idea that our country's had this wonderful, peaceful period.
No, I get that.
And now we're
threatened. I do get that, John, but
it's absolutely absurd.
Surely you are deeply concerned with an increasingly, I would say, organised and extreme bunch of people directly impacting
a lot of these things are worrying, as it was certainly some of the things I've talked about, like the IRA campaign, were incredibly worrying. But if you use this language, what do you do when there's a real threat now?
Well, I would argue
you've
that maybe there is
exhausted
a
the
real
language.
threat now.
Not of that sort. No.
Seriously?
We are not about to be threatened, amazingly, by an attack by nuclear missiles from Russia. We're not. You may think we are, and it's much more serious than it was, but it's not like it was in the 1950s or the 1960s. We do not have an IRA bombing campaign that is threatening us every single day.
Right.
My kids couldn't go to school in central London because of the bombing
people
campaign.
on a terror watch list.
All right, but let us get this in some sort of sense, like an ordinary Home Secretary or a former Home Secretary, and they would never talk like this. They'd be calm, reasonable, and worried and concerned.
And according to Suella
and that's what we ought to be.
Probably sleepwalking towards an absolute mess. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, is her language inflammatory? I mean,
it's appalling.
Is it? What are the particular things that she says that are inflammatory, would you say? I think she's got a good point about the ghettoisation of society. That we have not really encouraged assimilation as much as that we should. I mean, one shouldn't go out of one's way to offend religious or ethnic minorities for the sake of it. I'm not suggesting that. But, I mean, she references, I think, in her article, the Batley Grammar School, where sort of, any sort of suggestion that you might have said something untoward in some minor way about the Prophet Muhammad. And
but even that word, ghettoisation of society, and you're talking about integration, so that means that anybody that comes and mixes with the British people, you know, if you categorise that as ghettoisation...
With respect...
That's where I think there isn't enough assimilation.
All right, but what about this
phrase? But then that's the government's fault.
What about this phrase? The Islamists, the extremists... Is
it not on the people, individual responsibility to assimilate?
The Islamists, the extremists and the anti-Semites are in charge. Not that I've noticed. They've bullied the Labour Party, they've bullied our institutions, and they have bullied our country, wait for it, into submission. Well, that is crazy. That is not actually true.
And also, can you imagine...
Can I just ask on this one then? So when you see schools now being dragged to the High Court because they don't want to have a designated prayer room in there, for example, you see issues going on throughout society, whether it's an infiltration of Prevent or whether or not it's our education system, serious question marks over the legal system when it came to the prosecution and the sentencing for those people who had those paragliders on as well. And you see now increasing political movements to the point where parliamentary convention was
right, so we're being our country is being bullied into submission. Come on.
Well, we did submit on Wednesday, didn't we?
No, wait, hold on a moment. We are in a general election year. We're moving rather sedately towards our general election, absolutely as per normal.
Are we
moving
sedately towards a general election, Mark? I mean, we do have some quite extreme fruity characters who are running at this next general election and going to stand against certain MPs. By the way, apparently tomorrow there's going to be a protest outside Wes Streeting's office by a load of people, you know?
No, I am concerned about the sort of febrile nature of public debate at the moment. I hear what John's saying. I mean, I'm not anticipating that some Islamic revolution is going to overthrow British democracy. I'm not anticipating that. But, as I say, I think Suella Braverman has got a point that we have not encouraged assimilation the way we should have done. I think we have been slightly walking on eggshells.
Why can't you say it in the way you say it?
Well, OK, I mean, I wish she would use my tone of voice.
Exactly, your tone of voice.
But these are things worth pointing out.
Sure.
I'm just concerned that we are oversensitive about making sure nobody is ever offended.
Well, hang
And
on a
that, in my
minute,
view,
because
stymies
you could look at that both ways. Because can you imagine if any Labour MP said that the Jewish community are in charge of Britain now? That would be anti-Semitic. Or if they said, oh, the media are biased when it comes to Israel and Palestine. So why is it that she can say it about Islamists, which she knows people will conflate with just the general Muslim
They
community?
shouldn't conflate it, really, because they are different.
But
right?
Patrick,
So
imagine if a Labour
Islamism is
MP said
different
that.
to it.
Imagine if a Labour MP said that about the Jewish community. It would be anti-Semitic, and we would all rightfully condemn that.
But they'd have to say something like, Israeli extremists or Jewish extremists.
But are in charge of Britain now.
But
that would be an anti-Semitic trope, and I think that, you know, talking about Islamists are in charge of Britain now is making it look and is actually complimenting some of the things that she said about invasions and just this inflammatory, horrible language.
No, I mean, I agree with Joanna on this. It is so... Language is very important. If you up it like this and up it like this and exaggerate, you've then got nothing to say when things are really serious.
Well, OK, fine. Look, those are obviously...
Things are really serious.
Go on, final point.
Things are really serious. I mean, yes, OK.
Right, so we're all being... We've been knocked into submission. I don't feel that.
No, I mean, I think what happened in Parliament recently is pretty poor, pretty concerning.
Concerning, yeah.
She's just desperate to be the next leader.
Is that submission? Well, it seems to me it's somewhere along that path.
She's desperate to be the next leader, and she's just clutching at straws for anything at this point.
All right, look, it's interesting. Time will tell, but I know there are a lot of people out there, and there are a lot of people who watch this show who are incredibly concerned and do feel as though that there is some kind of radical takeover in place, and that those people who are extremists, as I've said right at the start of my monologue there, they are very clear about the fact that they want to take over. Whether or not they'll be allowed to is a different kettle of fish, but they are very clear about the fact that they want to. So, anyway, there we go. Look, slightly different now. Happy Monday's former tour manager pleaded his innocence on this show this week, so regular viewers and listeners of this show will know who this guy is. He was being accused of an £80 million cocaine smuggling plot. Well, he was in court yesterday, and the verdict has been made. We'll reveal all very shortly. But could Prince Harry's book Spare come back to haunt him? We will be the only TV channel giving you live updates of Prince Harry's drugs court case in America. But up next in the head-to-head, with filmmaker Andrew Drury, who has met Shamima Begum, spent quite a bit of time with her, and human rights lawyer as well, were the courts right to block Shamima Begum's return to the UK? That's going to be our question. This is Patrick Christys Tonight, and we're only on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys Tonight. We're only on GB News, and it's time now for our head-to-head. Well, Shamima Begum has lost her latest appeal to overturn the UK government's decision that removed her British citizenship. So Begum's lawyers argue that the Home Office were acting unlawfully, partly because of their failure to consider the now 24-year-old as a potential victim of trafficking. Well, the Court of Appeal say that Begum must now stay in Syria.
For these reasons, we unanimously dismiss the appeal. It could be argued that the decision in Miss Begum's case was harsh. It could also be argued that Miss Begum is the author of her own misfortune.
It certainly could. Now, responding to the court's decision, the Home Office said it was pleased. Well, this is how Begum's solicitors reacted.
We are going to keep fighting. I want to say that I'm sorry to Shamima and to her family that after 5 years of fighting, she still hasn't received justice in a British court. And to promise her and to promise the government that we're not going to stop fighting.
It says that the core factual history remains the same. As a 15-year-old British child, she was lured, encouraged and deceived for the purposes of sexual exploitation. Do you buy that? Joining us today to discuss this verdict is human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan and a man who spent 2 years working with and in and around Shamima Begum, which is filmmaker Andrew Drury. Chaps, thank you very, very much. Andrew, I'll start with you. So you know Shamima better than, frankly, most people, OK?
Yep.
Do you think she should be coming home?
No, quite factually, no, because I know her as a person. I spent, say, 2 years. I gave her an opportunity at the beginning. I worked a character out, and by the time that I left and the last time I spoke to her, no, not sure, she's a manipulator.
Could you just expand on that a bit before we go to show this? So what do you mean by manipulator?
Well, when I first met her, I saw this kind of frightened little rabbit as I met her, and she was kind of apologetic for everything she'd done. She'd understand what she had done. And then over a period of time, through text messages she sent to me from the camp and loads of visits, I changed my opinion. There was, if I can let you know how I changed my opinion, she had 3 kids that died. She showed me a picture from her purse. She pulled out one of these pictures with a child with, like, chocolate around her face. And it kind of made me a little bit sad. So when I got back, I sent her a message home saying, I'm sorry, Shamima, it really made me upset seeing your picture of your dead children. She said, don't worry about that, Andrew. I'm over that now. She showed no empathy.
OK, all right. Shoaib, your views on it, then. I think you think we should have her back now.
Yes, of course. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I think that in terms of her personality, what she's like as a person, her character, I think that forms a very, very small part of this whole saga, of this whole jig. So that's a really tiny part of it. It doesn't really matter What she's done, if that's a crime, that's a crime. That's bad enough. I don't think we really need to be punishing her extra. Is she a nice person or not? If she at the time, she had been crying about her children, would we have her back? I don't think those things matter anyway. The whole point is she is British. She was born in the UK, as far as we know, and I think it's probably accepted now. She's never been to Bangladesh. She's never been to, she has no other nationality. She was British, born here, raised here. She became what she became here. Yes, to be honest, we don't even know what crimes she has committed. But even if we accept she's committed some heinous crimes, yes, lots of people in the UK have. We punish them according to our laws. We treat them as British. So yeah, the point is she should be allowed back home. This is her home. The Syrian camp is not
Andrew,
her home.
I'll put that to you that, hey, lots of people in Britain have committed heinous crimes. I'm not sure sewing someone into a suicide vest would count as that. But anyway, go on, your view.
Well, what about the victims? I mean, we hear all apologise about her, poor Shamima. What about the victims in Raqqa? What about the victims in Syria that were fear of ISIS, what she was part of? What about, she was Hizbah, the morality police? What about the people that she's taught, she's involved, she's given fear to? What about those people? What rights they got? I hear all this sort of, heartfelt about bringing her back. What about those? Have you ever thought about the victims? She legitimised the bombing of Manchester. Do you really want somebody like that back walking around your streets?
Shoaib?
Again, I don't understand. In terms of we're talking about the victims, and firstly, I don't think I ever said there's very few people who would say poor Shamima. That's not the point. The point is she was British. She's not Bangladeshi. Why should the Bangladeshis have her? If we're saying, no, she is stateless, if we admit that, she's going to, stay in a Syrian camp, that's what she should, that's a different thing. But for people who say she's not stateless and she goes to Bangladesh, that's complete rubbish. Why
would you, Shoaib, just to get to the bottom of that then, so would you be happy for her to stay where she is then? Because it's not actually just as binary a choice as, well, it's Britain or Bangladesh. She is currently somewhere else. She could just stay there, Shoaib. Or are you desperate to have her back here?
I'm not desperate to have her back, but I think that's the right thing. I think a citizenship should not have been revoked. I think that's quite a medieval concept, banishing or exiling people. A civilized society doesn't do that. We punish people, we prove in court what they've done, we lock them up. Some people we lock up, people die in prison in the UK. We still don't, we don't push them into the ocean or push them off the cliffs of Dover or push them into another country. That's not what we do. We used to do that centuries ago, send all the criminals off to another prison island. We don't do that anymore. We shouldn't do that with her.
But, the criminal, in this case, Andrew, sent herself off to an island. So, can I just ask you, Andrew, a couple of points on this? So, a lot of people say, oh, look, she was only 15 at the time. A lot of those people, by the way, there seems to be a crossover in the Venn diagram between those people who want votes for 16-year-olds and people who are simultaneously claiming Shamima didn't know what she was doing, by the way, but there we go. And people will say she was a child, and people will say that, obviously, she's our responsibility now, and that she can be de-radicalised. So, your views on that?
Well, according to her, she has been de-radicalised by herself. I think she's been there too long, for a fact. And one point I'd like to make about her coming home, we don't have that choice anyway, because there's a good possibility she'll face her justice in Syria. She could, I would imagine, their court system, she'll face trial over there and could be sentenced to about 20 years over there anyway. So I don't think we have that option. The citizenship, giving her citizenship doesn't mean she's coming home. It just means that she's in a Syrian camp as a British citizen. And she certainly knew what she was doing when she went there. That 15, I've heard that age 15 talk so many times. She was a bright, intelligent, A-star student. She knew exactly what she was doing. She lived in an Islamic community. She knew what ISIS stood for. She went there with an open mind. And I hear about all this, that she was trafficked. She never once said she was trafficked. There was 4 girls got together and decided they was going to. That's what they were going to do.
So when you were talking to her, Andrew, was she saying things, I was trafficked for sexual exploitation? Was she saying that to you?
No, she said that when she got to Syria, she got a choice of husband. I know, you could say that was being trafficked, but she actually loved her husband. So when I first met her, she showed me happy pictures of her and her husband. I know you're shaking your head, but that's what she told me. I've met her, you haven't. She told me she loved him, and she continued that conversation for 3 or 4 months after we meeting. It was only when she was schooled by the other girls in the prison, she said he mentally abused her. So she changed her story all along. So you can shake your head, but that's a fact. As I say, I've met her.
Sorry, can I just respond to that? A 15-year-old in the UK, any other British girl, 15-year-old living happily with a 23-year-old man, we'd say that's a happy marriage. She doesn't have to say she is. If she is a child living with a man, having sex, having babies with a man, we would say that's sexual exploitation. If she's under 18, she is. She doesn't have to tell us that. So why is it different for this woman? I really don't understand this point. She was happy with this man. What does that even mean? A 15-year-old...
The difference for that woman is her choice. She made that choice.
That is not a choice in the UK. That is not a choice. Under 18, you cannot consent.
She wasn't in the UK when she got married. It was her choice. She left the UK.
So the law shouldn't be... Sorry, but that's such a ridiculous thing to say. Isn't that exactly what child grooming is? All child grooming victims are happy.
How do you know she was groomed? What evidence have you got of grooming? Tell me your evidence of her being groomed.
The evidence was she was a 16-year-old with a baby. That is all the evidence we need of grooming.
There's no evidence that she was trafficked. There was no evidence she was groomed.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, Shoaib, I mean, what is the age of consent in Syria?
Sorry, why are we talking about Syria? She was British at the time. She went from Britain.
She was over there, though, wasn't she?
Is that how we deal with paedophilia or other cases? If a British man goes to Syria and has, a child with a 15-year-old Syrian, that's fine because he's in Syria? Of course it is.
It depends on the law in the place, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't.
It's 15, but I've just been told in my ear, apparently the age of consent in Syria is 15. Actually.
Yeah, no, so many paedophiles we do bring back and punish them here because we treat them according to our laws. Not that
you seem to be forgetting the point that she went. It was nobody's fault.
No, but
she went
there. So just to clarify the trafficking point, it has been the courts have accepted she was a victim of trafficking. Even the
does that excuse Shoaib? Okay. In fact, I'm quite keen to get to the bottom of this as well, Shoaib, actually. Who is paying for her appeals, constant appeals?
To be honest, I wouldn't know, but I'm assuming she's probably getting legal aid, yeah. It would probably be the British taxpayer. I would assume
it's also by Reprieve, a charitable organisation.
Right. So it's a combination of what we think the British taxpayer and a charitable organisation are paying for it. Right, gosh, OK, look, chaps, thank you very much. It's a cracking head-to-head. It's exactly what we wanted. So we'll have to get you back on and do this next time she launches an appeal, probably. That is, of course, the human rights lawyer, Shoaib Khan, and the man who spent a couple of years working around Shamima Begum there. That is the filmmaker Andrew Drury. Look, who do you agree with? OK, so did the Court of Appeal make the right decision? Martin on X says yes. Hopefully that is the last we ever hear of Shamima Begum. Martin, I hate to break it to you, mate, it won't be. But Jackie also says, no, she was born, raised and schooled here. She should have been repatriated to face British court proceedings. Now, your view is in. Shock horror, 95% of you agree that the Court of Appeal made the right decision. 5% of you say they made the wrong one. Look, coming up, we've got a little bit more Shamima for you because I'm going to be talking to her family's lawyer, Tasneen Akunji. So we'll find out firsthand, really. He's talking exclusively to us here on GB News, so we're keen to get his view. Another one for you is the co-founder of Just Stop Oil wants you to protest outside her house, essentially. She courted a lot of controversy by essentially saying that it's OK for people to protest outside politicians' houses, and now she apparently has welcomed it outside hers. She's live in the studio shortly. Now, will Prince Harry's buck spare come back to haunt him? We speak to the man who has lodged an appeal calling for the Duke of Sussex's visa application to be made public. Of course, it's all in relation to whether or not he lied about taking drugs. We're the only news outlet bringing that to you tonight. And earlier this week, we spoke to former Happy Mondays tour manager Anthony Murray. He was up on trial for an £80 million cocaine haul charge in Turkey. Did the court find him innocent or guilty? I will reveal all next. It's Patrick Christys tonight. We're on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that, and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Now, coming up, the co-founder of Just Stop Oil joins me live to explain why she would be happy for someone to protest outside her home. But first, former Happy Mondays tour manager Anthony Murray has been fighting for his life after being accused of playing a role in an £80 million cocaine bust. Now, his life has been on hold since his arrest in October 2020, with the risk of a 55-year prison sentence in a Turkish jail looming over his head. So regular viewers and listeners to this show might remember I spoke to Anthony a little earlier this week ahead of this hearing. Any previous convictions?
Yeah, a few, yes. Yeah, but not for cocaine and not for 250 kilo.
And he obviously made it incredibly clear that he wanted to clear his name at the trial yesterday.
My name, everyone says this, why are you going back? Right. I want to go back, I need to be clear.
Well, since then, Anthony has cleared his name and he intends to have a hell of a party to celebrate. Apparently, I'm delighted to be joined now by Anthony Murray himself. Anthony, you must be delighted. Right.
Mirror.
Right. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I lost a tenner on this. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I won a few tenners, let me tell you.
Right, so look. How did you get off it? Go on. Look, obviously you didn't do it, so there's that. But what did you want? Because you said you went to Turkey with your daughter to get her teeth done, and then you ended up completely coincidentally being shown round Turkey by someone who was involved with the coke trade or something. Just go on. What happened?
So I got introduced to this guy. He said, from a friend in Manchester, said if you go to Istanbul, my friend will take you round. He's got daughters, same age as your daughter. They'll look after you. I'll get there. So we went, and I phoned him, he come to see us, he took us out, this was it, went on for a few weeks, about 6 weeks, because I had some dental work done, I got an infection, I had to stay. The police are watching him and his group, so I'm having meals with this group, but they speak in Turkish, I don't know what they're speaking, I don't speak Turkish. The police are all around, videoing, watching it. I get called Antonio, because it's easy to pronounce. There's a Colombian involved in the gang who's called Antonio, but they don't know who he is. They never see him, so they pick up on me. They say it's me. And then I get nicked to get put in the jail, and I've been fighting since then, 3.5 years. And so on Thursday, I had a new judge who flies in and sits there for 3 hours. He hears my name, I stands up, just say, it's going on in Turkish. I keep reading, looking at the lawyer to read his face. A little bit worried now again, as usual, because I'm thinking it could end, but be back to the jail. And the interpreter, the girl, looks at me, smiles and goes, "You've got not guilty." So I asked her twice, I said, "What did you say?" I'm still looking at the lawyer. There's no expression on his face. The judge is looking at me, puts his thumb up, kind of puts his thumb up, or picks the paper up. So I said again, "Are you sure?" She said, "Yeah." One of the co-defendants behind me said, "Well done, you're going home." And that was it. I had to sit then for another 2 hours before I could get released from the court. And that was it. I was straight to the airport, straight to Northern Cyprus, over to Southern Cyprus. Then I'm here now, and I can finish my book, because I'd written a book when I was in there, but we didn't have the ending. So now I had an happy ending yesterday, and it's done. I've got the ending for the book. So,
I mean, look, massive congrats. You must be probably the most relieved man in the world. I mean, you were staring down the barrel of 55 years in a Turkish jail, weren't you?
Yeah, I was dying. It was finished. It was over for me in there. It was gone. Just the health in there. I can survive the jail, but not the conditions. It's just, and I'm, it's what it is. But yeah, I'm here. I had a few cups of tea yesterday. I'm going to have a couple of drinks today.
Yeah,
Sean's on the phone. Bez is on the phone. So
yeah,
everyone's been phoning.
So have Sean Ryder and Bez been in touch then?
Straight away, all day. Sean was on the phone all day, ringing me while I was in court, but I had to keep blanking the call. Bez rang as well yesterday, so I'm going back to the UK soon. I'll hook up with Sean and Bez, do some photographs. I've got a bit of touring to do. They're going to help me promote the book. And so, yeah, we're ready to party now. It's all 24-hour party people. We're back on.
You're back in the game, mate.
I'm back in the game. Literally, I'm back in the game.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, well done. Can I just say as well, when you were there then, because you actually flew from Tel Aviv to Turkey, and last time I saw you, I said to you, look, why on earth are you doing this, right? Because I don't think there's any extradition treaty between Israel and Turkey. And you just said, look, you want to go and clear your name. I thought you were mad for doing that. I'd have stayed in Tel Aviv.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Patrick, everybody did, but I need to travel. I like travelling, and I can't go, I can travel. It has to be legal the way I'm travelling. I like to do what I'm doing. I don't want to be looking for them over my back all the way.
That's true.
And I don't want to live in Israel the rest of my life, or South America, or North Korea. I wanted to get to North Korea, but we had the pandemic on, so I couldn't get down there. But it's been like that. It's been touch and go whether to go back. I don't want to die in a Turkish jail. Even though it's like being on the Happy Mondays tour bus in that jail. That's the only reason I could survive that. It was... The dressing room was the same as that prison cell, let me tell you.
Oh, man. Right, so go on, just describe to me what kind of party you're going to be having when you get back.
Oh, it's going to last for about a month. It'll be the headlines. It'll make the headlines this one. And you can come along as well. You come and join us.
I tell you
and
what,
we'll see you in London.
I can sense falling off the wagon fast approaching here.
Oh, for sure. Listen, forget the wagon. That's off for the year.
All right, good lad. Well, look, thank you very much. Good luck to you, mate, and well done as well. Pleasure to check in with you. That was a former store manager, Anthony Murray. Anyone else think that'd happen? Me neither. No, well done. Fair enough. Anyway, coming up, shifting tone now. More on Shamima Begum and the ruling that says that she will not regain her UK citizenship. We will be speaking to Shamima Begum's family's lawyer, Tasneem Akunja, exclusively here on GB News. And will Prince Harry's book Spare come back to haunt him? We speak to the man who lodged an appeal calling for the Duke of Sussex's visa application to be made public and whether he lied about taking drugs. But next, co-founder of Just Stop Oil wants you to protest outside her house, apparently. She's live on the show next to explain exactly what's going on. It's Patrick Christys tonight, and we are only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat. Yep. Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the old tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back. So, the co-founder of Just Stop Oil, Sarah Lunnan, revealed on BBC Radio 4 that she would be, quote, delighted if activists peacefully protested outside her home in defence of protests taking place outside MP's home. So this comes following fresh concerns, obviously, over MP's safety and the home of Tobias Ellwood being targeted by pro-Palestine protesters just last week. So Sarah Lunnan did face quite a lot of backlash on Wednesday for her opinion piece in The Guardian, calling out Labour for not standing up to the finance sector and right-wing think tanks. Well, pleased to say that she joins me now. Sarah, thank you very much. Could you clarify a couple of things for us then? So do you think that more people should protest outside MPs' homes?
Do I think more people should? No, not.
But you think it's okay to do that, though, yeah?
I say, Patrick. Yeah, I've got really bad delay on this line. Okay. Yeah, it's really weird. Sorry. Right. Do I think more people should protest outside people's homes? I'm not calling for that to happen. No, I'm not. So,
okay. But you think that protests are okay outside MPs' homes?
I think and you might even agree with me on this. I think our politics is failing us, right? Yeah. Like I have not met a single person when I say, hey, is the political system working for you? Are you getting what you want? Do you do you trust the people you're voting for? I haven't heard one person say yes to me. Yeah, it's really working. I feel really heard. And I think what we're seeing in these protests that are happening at MPs' offices, at homes, is that people need to be heard. They want to be heard, and they're not being heard.
Yeah, is there a line though, Sarah? Because this is the thing, obviously you guys could run for political office yourselves, you could try to get into Parliament, you could try to force that change. Everyone knows the kind of cause that you stand for. Is there not a line when you've got MPs at home, maybe with young children, with partners, etc.? That's. I mean, if the mafia did that, we'd be calling it out, wouldn't we?
Oh well, yeah, we would. And you're right. There is a line in all of this stuff. When you're taking these kinds of actions, you have to be really very, very careful about what you're doing. I'm not advocating for people to turn up, huge numbers of people to turn up. I think if you're going to do this, you have to do it in a very careful, considered way. You do have to take care, absolutely. But people are driven to doing this kind of stuff because our politics is failing, So we need to do something else, and we need our politicians to address it. And I have to say that actually, if anyone does come outside my home, it's not going to be much fun. It's going to be cups of tea. And I think you've been invited to a much more interesting party earlier on that's going to happen outside my front door.
Yeah, I mean, I did wonder whether or not... So some people who were delayed and held up by a variety of different Just Stop Oil protests, people had said that they had wives in labour. Somebody claimed anyway that their mother was having a stroke, for example, and they couldn't get to the hospital. I imagine a lot of those people would remain very, very angry with Just Stop Oil. And you are one of the co-founders of it. I mean, would you really be OK with those people banging on your front door saying to you, you killed my mum?
It would obviously be very, very difficult if that happened, So, yeah, that would be really difficult, and those people are rightly upset. Of course they are. So, but would they have a right to do that? I do believe they would have a right to come and talk to me. Of course, yeah, I do. I do believe that.
OK. So, I mean, is this... I just wonder if it's a slightly dangerous precedent to set, because, people might take that to an extreme. I mean, you don't know who you're going to get, saying, oh, it's all right to go. There are a lot of people that I speak to or have spoken to from Just Stop Oil who I understand they are, absolutely really adamant about the climate crisis and all of this stuff. And I get that if you get locked into that mentally, that you think that it can legitimise a lot of extreme action. And I understand that. But I wonder whether or not some of those people maybe are actually quite vulnerable, and that if they then see the green light to go to an MP's house, and if you think the end of the world is coming, then any action is legitimised, isn't it, really, after that? Are you not concerned that you might end up having to explain yourself in that regard at some point for the actions of someone else?
So, Patrick, you make a really good point, and that's why we have this absolute ethos of non-violence. So if anybody comes to act and take action with Just Stop Oil, we have a whole suite of training so that people understand what it means to take action and what they need to do.
Can I come to the training?
Yeah, that would be great.
I'd love to see that. I'd really like to see that. I would really love to come and see, behind the curtain of Just Stop Oil, if it's possible.
It's a date.
All right, OK. Well, hey, it's a Friday night and I've got a date. So, look, all right, thank you very much. And, really interested to talk to you. Oh, go on.
Patrick, before I go, your point about standing for elections.
Yes, quickly.
So right now, hundreds of people are actually getting in touch with Just Stop Oil because of the piece in The Guardian about standing independent candidates, about supporting them, and they are getting in touch about doing that. So, for those people who do think politics is failing them, that I think there is going to be an alternative.
All right, OK. Well, interesting. Sarah, look, thank you very much. That's Sarah Lunn there, just talking to us a bit about why she's happy for people to protest outside her own home. Look, coming up, will Prince Harry's book Spare come back to haunt him? There is an appeal at the moment going on in court about whether or not he lied about drugs on his visa application, OK? That hearing is literally just finished. We will have live reaction from it. We're the only news channel doing that for you tonight. And Nigel Farage has just given a speak at CPAC in the US. We will get the latest on what he said, but next, more on Shamima Begum, because we've got an exclusive with Shamima Begum's family lawyer. So, stay tuned.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It'll be a chilly start to the weekend. There will be some early sunshine though, but a risk of showers developing in the afternoon. Low pressure's been in charge through today. That will slowly start to fill, bringing us a slightly more settled evening and Saturday. So any showers through the day will tend to fade away through the course of the night, but they will still persist across some western coasts and across the far southeast as well, where it could be quite breezy overnight. Elsewhere, though, it will be a clear and calm and dry night, so temperatures will drop away, so it's likely to be quite a cold start to the day on Saturday. So frost, potentially some icy patches, and also some mist and fog by tomorrow morning. That should lift and clear by mid-morning, and many areas will see a dry and bright day through Saturday. The best of the sunshine will definitely be through the morning. Cloud will bubble up into lunchtime and into the afternoon, allowing a few showers to develop. These should be fairly few and far between, and they will be quite light if you do get caught in one. In the sunshine, it will be feeling fairly pleasant as well with those light winds. It will be another cold start to the day on Sunday, but across northern areas it should stay dry and bright through much of the day. In the south, though, quite a different story with some quite persistent wet weather set to arrive across southern areas of England, possibly into parts of South Wales too. Turns drier more widely once again on Monday before further wet weather arrives in the north on Tuesday. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain,
but it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So, so when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100, and the next year you spend maybe £101, as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase, and that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government way back in
80 years, 70
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is. It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight,
we unanimously dismiss the appeal.
Shamima Begum's family lawyer is live next. Plus,
of course, I had been doing cocaine around this time at someone's country house.
we are the only news outlet telling you the very latest about Prince Harry's drugs court case today. In fact, it has literally just finished. So we'll be talking to a man who was there. Nigel Farage has been talking in Washington.
Going to get Donald Trump back elected and in the White House.
Farage predicts a White House return for Donald Trump. Reaction later this hour. I'll have all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages today with Director of the Popular Conservatives, it's Mark Littlewood, Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju and ex-BBC political chief John Sargent. And can you tell what's wrong here?
Thanks for your advice.
Get ready, Britain, here we go. An exclusive with Shamima Begum's family lawyer next.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. And we start with some breaking news. Just Stop Oil says it has disrupted Labour MP Annalise Dodd's fundraising dinner in Oxford. During the protest, they delivered a request that the Labour frontbencher pledges to leave the Labour Party within 6 months if the party fails to cancel all Tory oil and gas licences granted after 2021. This is a developing story. We'll bring you more as we get it. Well, police have confirmed 3 children whose bodies were found at a home in Bristol died from knife injuries. 7-year-old Faraz, 3-year-old Jury and 9-month-old Mohammed Bash were found in the Sea Mills area on Sunday. A 42-year-old woman, arrested on suspicion of their murder, remains in hospital and is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries. A vigil is being held in memory of the children tonight. Former Post Office Chief Executive Paula Venables has been stripped of her CBE by the King following the Horizon IT scandal. She was heavily criticised for routinely denying any problems with the system, which led to the wrongful prosecution of hundreds of sub-postmasters. She received the honour in 2018 and announced that she planned to hand it back with immediate effect last month. She'll now formally lose the title for bringing the honours system into disrepute. An unexploded Second World War bomb found in Plymouth has now been successfully taken out to sea, and police say it will be detonated within 24 hours. The 500-kilogram device was found in a garden in Keyham and lifted onto a military vehicle. 10,000 residents have now been allowed to return to their homes after they were evacuated. Local MP Johnny Mercer has thanked emergency responders who worked around the clock. Well, a high-altitude balloon has reportedly been detected flying over the United States. US officials have told news outlets that it was spotted by military aircraft over Colorado in the west of the country and is drifting eastwards in the jet stream. Its origin and its purpose is still unknown, but it's not thought to present a threat. Of course, it comes a year after a Chinese spy balloon flew over the continental US for several days. Nigel Farage says the 2024 US election affects the safety of the world. The GB News presenter was speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference just outside Washington, D.C., where he urged delegates to support Donald Trump. He cited the UK's recent pro-Palestine protests and claimed that an extremist fringe is now threatening our democracy.
And now we see British politicians cowed, scared. They were even scared to leave the building on Wednesday and Thursday evenings because we've forgotten who we are, we've forgotten what we are, and we've allowed an extremist fringe to bully us and threaten our very democracy. And that is why we need strong leaders. It's why we need leaders of conviction. It's why you in America and we in the world need Trump back in that White House.
And finally, the King has been pictured looking through thousands of cards sent by well-wishers. Sitting at a desk in Buckingham Palace, King Charles can be seen laughing at one card which shows a disgruntled dog recovering from treatment. The King has received 7,000 messages of support from around the world since his cancer diagnosis. Many have also shared their own experiences of cancer, with one telling him, "Remain positive and don't let it get you down." Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, straight back to Patrick.
So Shamima Begum has lost her appeal against the removal of British citizenship.
For these reasons, we unanimously dismiss the appeal. It could be argued that the decision in Miss Begum's case was harsh. It could also be argued that Miss Begum is the author of her own misfortune.
The now 24-year-old travelled to Syria in 2015 at the age of 15 before her citizenship was revoked on national security grounds. But her legal team has promised that they will keep fighting.
we are going to keep fighting. I want to say that I'm sorry to Shamima and to her family that after 5 years of fighting, she still hasn't received justice in a British court, and to promise her and to promise the government that we're not going to stop fighting.
So an official statement from her lawyers says that the core factual history remains the same. So they say this: as a 15-year-old British child, she was lured, encouraged and deceived for the purposes of sexual exploitation. So, from the woman who drastically changed her image from the headscarf, etc., to the baseball cap, who is the person really beneath the headwear? I'm joined now by Shamima Begum's family lawyer, Tasneem Akunji. Thank you very much. Look, I'm going to go to my panel on this afterwards, right? So I'm just keen to get your take on it and a bit of an inside story, really. How are her family, then? What are they making of all of this? Is they saying the fight's going to carry on?
Well, I mean, they've been through this process for the last 5 years with highs and lows. A previous Court of Appeal judgment went in her favour. The Supreme Court judgment overturned that. A different line and attack's been taken at the Supreme Court, the Appeal Court, and I'd imagine that her lawyers are going to take that to the Supreme Court too. So it is a roller coaster for them. This is a low point, of course, but I imagine that the direction of travel still remains the same.
Do they take any kind of responsibility for Shamima leaving in the first place and managing to get over there to Syria, etc.?
But of course, they would have loved to be able to intervene on that original fateful sort of decision that those 4 girls in total took. The problem was that the family was specifically excluded by the police at the time from any knowledge around the first girl moving, that's Shamima Begum, not Shamina Begum. And so they weren't aware of the dangers around their daughters. That all, came out quite bluntly in a sort of parliamentary committee hearing, where the police apologised for their failures around that, and so did the school.
And they say they had absolutely no idea whatsoever that she was engaging in extremist material online or had any plans at all to go via Turkey to join Islamic State.
No, the school themselves, they applied the principles of prevent, I guess, that were available at the time, and these girls showed no sign of it. But this sort of radicalisation can happen very, very quickly, and one has to look out for any sort of signs that come forward, particularly when you've got a very, very accomplished terrorist organisation who have targeted girls. They target them and they teach them how to sort of remain undetectable.
I've just spoken to an individual in the last hour who spent a couple of years in and around the area where Shamima was, and speaking to her quite regularly as well. He made the point that, as far as he was concerned, she initially showed quite a lot of contrition. She then appeared to have become quite manipulative, this is his words, and he fundamentally doesn't really think that she would necessarily be safe to be brought back to Britain. Do you think that there are safety implications of having Shamima Begum back in Britain?
I mean, if his concern is Shamima's safety, I can tell you now that her safety will be much better served in the UK than it is in a refugee camp in Syria.
I think he was referring to the safety of everyone else.
Well, I mean, I think if the UK state, which is one of the most mature states in the world, has a very mature police force, and albeit with some of the mistakes it's shown, but with a security service at its disposal, is not able to secure us from the potential, quote-unquote, unknown threats that Shamima Begum, now in her 20s, poses, then I think that's a bit of an embarrassment for our security services, really, if that's the actual position.
I think it sets a worrying precedent, though, that somebody can go and join a terrorist organisation, according to reports, being part of their so-called morality police, allegedly sewing people into suicide vests and all of that stuff, and then come back home. You don't think that sets a worrying precedent?
Well, I think that's interesting because normally what would happen if somebody joined a terrorist organisation is that they'd be arrested, taken to a court of law in the UK, evidence presented, and a jury of one's peers would then convict or acquit based on the evidence. And that is really all that anyone's been asking for, is that Shamima Begum be treated the same way as the bombers of the Ariana Grande contest were treated, as in the UK government hunted them down, found where one of them was in Libya, and then spent treasure and effort to bring them back to the UK to face trial. And the accusation about Shamima Begum is that she's been involved in terrorist-related activities If that is supportable, then she should be brought back to the UK and face trial in the UK and conviction if the evidence supports that charge.
And in terms of the family of Shamima Begum now, are they helping to fund some of her appeals? 'Cause, I mean, I know her legal team is going to carry on. There appears to be a little bit of a grey area as to exactly who is paying for this kind of never-ending cycle of appeals, really. I mean, is it the taxpayer?
Yeah, it will be the taxpayer. So our involvement in the case has always been pro bono. We've never taken a penny for our involvement in it. But in terms of Shamima Begum's lawyers, they are on the taxpayer to fund her continued appeals.
Just out of interest, then, why do you feel so strongly about this particular case, a case where, you know, there's a woman who doesn't dispute the fact that she was in ISIS? Why have you worked for free for so long to try to bring her back when, you know, there's a lot of other cases presumably you could be taking?
Sure. I mean, what her case highlights is the fact that we now have a two-tier citizenship system in the UK. So you have people who are indigenous to the UK who have an inviolable sort of citizenship because their parents are from this country. But people like Shamima Begum, who are born here but whose parents come from a different country, their citizenship appears to be of a low quality. And that, to us, is fundamentally offensive to the idea of citizenship.
I just find it interesting, sorry, very finally, I do just find it interesting, because I wasn't aware that you did it pro bono, right? But, you know, there are presumably other cases that could highlight this. Why pick someone who was in ISIS?
Well, I mean, there may well be other cases that could highlight this, but this was the case that came knocking on my door back in 2015. And I took it on the basis that, A, I was trying to get some children back who had made a terrible mistake and been manipulated into joining ISIS. And at the time, the country was very much behind that initiative. Things had changed in 2019, and when her citizenship was stripped, well, that was something that we felt very strongly about and continue to support on a pro bono basis.
All right. Tasneem, look, thank you very much. I know that you've gone out your way to talk to us exclusively this evening, and it's been insightful stuff, so I'll talk to you again soon, no doubt. Shamima Begum's family lawyer, Tasneem Akunji. Right, OK, look, let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Director of Popular Conservatives, I have got Mark Littlewood, I've got Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju, and ex-BBC political chief John Sargent. Mark, quite a lot to go at there, I felt. Yeah. Do you think the right decision has been made, and should the taxpayer be paying for these cycle of appeals now?
Well, I hope this now draws a line under the case. The judge who said this was potentially a harsh verdict, well, I would agree with that, but I think it's harsh but a fair verdict. And the national security concerns need to win out here, and they have been judged to have out-trumped other considerations. Unanimous verdict as well, I think. I think it would be a bit of a fool's errand, really, to go to the Supreme Court. I would hope this is the end of it. I think it is the correct decision. And listening to her lawyer there, I mean, one would like to believe that you could charge her with terrorist offences in a British court, but good luck gathering together the evidence and having eyewitnesses and being able to really bring that into testimony in a court here. I don't think that's practical at all.
So I thought something that was quite interesting there, Joanna, was I did put it to him about the idea that she might still be a threat. Now, I'll be honest, I was expecting him to say she's not a threat, she's completely changed. He didn't actually say that. So there was not the kind of total admission there that she does not pose a threat to us. But you'd bring her back, wouldn't you?
I would bring her back, and I think that he was completely correct when he referred to the two-tier kind of citizenship. When it comes to Shamima Begum, I think that if it was anybody else, you know, let's say if somebody was in another country and they'd, you know, just happened to have a British dad and they were a far-right extremist or something like that, nobody would be saying, yeah, bring them back here because they should have citizenship here, rather than where they were born and where they actually, you know, grew up. So I think that it's important for her to come back, but, you know, anybody who's in support of that doesn't mean that we want to be bumping into Shamima when we go out shopping or anything like that. She should face trial. And I think that it is quite realistic.
This is what I've got to ask. I'll come to you in a second, John, but this is what I've got to ask. You know, would you let her live next door to you? Would you be happy about that? Because she's going to end up living next door to someone, right? She's not going to end up spending the rest of her life in prison.
Well, at the same time, we have to be able to look at the facts, and obviously the professionals will be able to do that in the sense of what crime she actually committed. And I'm not trying to, downplay her joining ISIS as nothing, but it's important. And we also do have other people who were extremists on the other side of things. We had someone who was a right-wing extremist who sadly murdered the politician Joe Cox. So, it goes both ways, and nobody's kind of trying to hunt down to see whether that person's parents were born in, somewhere in Eastern Europe or something like that. So I think that, we have to look at this fairly and not conflate ethnicity and nationality.
John, your view on this. I mean, I know that the vast majority of our viewers, and I've said this publicly before, myself included, I think it would be a complete and utter mistake to bring this girl back. Some mistakes have consequences. She joined a jihadi death cult.
Yeah, I think the point is that we've got to remember what the judges were looking at was simply whether it was lawful or not for the Home Secretary to take that decision. So they didn't go through a lot of the arguments you've just heard in the last 10 minutes. That is very important, and that's why, as Mark says, they should be advised not to take this further, because that's just a straightforward decision. You dislike it, OK, well, then it's got to be changed politically. But the Home Secretary has that power. Something like 20 people every year are caught in this same thing. It's not just to do with her and her only. That's the important thing. The other thing to realise is that you couldn't say, we'll give you back your citizenship, but there'll be certain conditions. No, you've got to... Either someone is a British citizen, which means that she could do whatever she likes. Now, you'd have to be a very trusting person to imagine, after what she's been through, that she'd be just some sort of loyal Brit who would never hurt anybody. No, she might hurt
Can I
people.
just say, though, if any of you guys had a 15-year-old daughter who ended up being groomed by some extremist group... but what would you actually say?
Suicide
but
bombers,
what would you
internet
actually
suicide
say?
bombers.
What would you say? Would you still see them as British?
I'd say good riddance, you jihadi lunatic.
I'm not talking about just...
No, but also...
That's what I'd say.
If it was your 15-year-old daughter.
You can hold me to this. I mean, I think it's like a very small, a witheringly small chance this is actually happening. But if I ever have a 15-year-old daughter who I find out one day has gone to join a jihadi death cult in the Middle East, she is not coming home.
Yeah.
She's not.
Yeah, but also, I think there's another point to bear in mind too. She went at 15, so that seems, vulnerable and difficult. And if you had a 15-year-old, but she's there for several years.
Yeah.
And it's only at this point when, in fact, IS loses, when the Islamic State have lost, and their citadel in Raqqa has been destroyed. So they're no longer in charge of anything. And she then starts saying, "Oh, I want to go back home." Right. So it's not a question of this little girl of 15. No. She's not 15 forever. Right. She's 17, 18, 19, 20, and she's now 24.
The uncomfortable thing as well that a lot of people like to ignore in this discussion is we have actually let a huge amount of returning ISIS fighters back, and it's not always ended that well, Mark.
No, that's right. And, I do think the point that John makes is the right one here, that if you were to... You can't just look at what she did when she was 15. That might be forgivable on the grounds that she's a minor. She persists with this into adulthood. That's the key thing. It's in my view, unambiguously the right decision. And to Joanna's point, is it practical to actually charge her with what was going on in this faraway land? We'll have limited evidence, so it's more of almost a military national security decision than you can put this through a sort of fair
But how do you know that they've got limited evidence until you actually go and she's actually tried properly? You can't say that.
I am presuming that it is rather difficult for an English court to marshal evidence from a war zone in Syria compared to an incident that happens in the United Kingdom.
Sorry, Mark, there's also things that she's openly admitted. It's not like she's saying, they captured me and I had no idea what was happening. Yeah, she's taken accountability to an extent, and those admissions are going to count for something in a trial. When she first started saying things initially to the chap we had on earlier, who was a filmmaker who's over there wasn't this talk of I was trafficked for sexual exploitation. Then the lawyers get involved and then they say that forms the basis of her defence. Yeah. So if we do bring her back, we're going to end up in a situation where, whatever she's admitted to or whatever, the lawyers are going to get involved with that, and it could kibosh the whole thing. I think overall for this, my argument is, again, about that two-tier system when it comes to citizenship, and also looking at nationality versus ethnicity. I'm not a Shamima Begum, cheerleader or anything like that, but I think she should have the same, be tried the same as anybody else.
OK, good stuff. Thank you very much, everybody. Another lively start to the show. Look, coming up, Nigel Farage has just given a speech at the CPAC conference in the US of A, which we will hear from.
Going to get Donald Trump back elected and in the White House.
There's a time difference in America. Anyway, we'll get the latest on what he said. And next, look, Prince Harry's name is back in the courts today, this time over his US visa and his drug use. So that court hearing has just finished. It finished for about 20 minutes ago over in Washington, D.C. We've got the latest from the man who brought that case against the American authorities to tell us all about that lawsuit. So you will not get this anywhere else tonight. This is Patrick Christys. I'll see you in a tick.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. So, tomorrow's front pages are on the way very shortly. But first, this is a court case being brought against the Department of Homeland Security to release Prince Harry's US immigration records. And it's just finished in Washington, D.C. Conservative think tank the Heritage Foundation has sued the Department of Homeland Security over their decision not to share Harry's visa records, particularly those relating to his drug use. Now, Harry admitted in his memoir, Spare, last year, that he had previously taken cocaine, marijuana and psychedelic mushrooms. The Heritage Foundation have therefore questioned why the prince was ever allowed to live in the US in the first place, and whether he lied on his visa application in 2020. They have ultimately called for these documents to be made public. Well, joining me now is the man who has just been in court for this lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security. It's Niall Gardner. Niall, thank you very much. So what's happened then?
Patrick, thanks very much for having me on the show tonight. And as you mentioned, I just actually came back to my office from the federal courtroom here in Washington, D.C. And I have to say the hearing actually was very, very positive from our point of view. We have asked for the release of Prince Harry's immigration records. We want to establish whether or not Harry lied with regard to his drug use. We want to see whether he received any kind of preferential treatment from U.S. authorities. And so the federal judge who heard evidence from both sides, arguments from both sides, is treating this case very, very seriously. And he made it clear at the end of the hearing that he may request very soon, in his own words, to see Harry's immigration records in camera. In other words, the judge himself would be able to review these records, and he would be able to see exactly what Prince Harry put down on his application. This is a very, very big step, if indeed the judge goes ahead with that. And I think there's a very strong chance that he will. And so this would be a very big development in terms of getting closer to the release of Harry's record. So a very positive outcome from our point of view.
Well, just talk me through that then, now. So as it stands, then, the judge himself has not been able to view whether or not Prince Harry lied on his visa application to America, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And, it sounds like he now wants to.
Yeah, so the Department of Homeland Security has refused to release any information whatsoever with regard to the details of Harry's immigration records. So the judge himself has not had a chance to review these records, and he made it categorically clear at the end of the hearing that very soon he will make a decision about whether he himself should have the opportunity to review those records in camera is the legal term. And if indeed the judge is able to review these records, then I think that is a very, very significant development. The judge
it will be significant.
Yeah.
Now, as I understand it, the lawyers representing Harry, I've got in my notes here that they also have represented the Biden presidency, apparently. Is that right? And they're saying that the book spare is not sufficient evidence that Harry ever took drugs, and that it simply could have been used to sell books. Is that their argument?
Yeah. So I mean, I sat in the front of the courtroom. I heard the Biden administration's lawyers make their arguments. After all, we have sued the Biden administration for the release of these
Apologies,
records.
yes, that's my fault. Sorry.
And so the Biden administration officials representing the Department of Homeland Security argued today that Prince Harry's own book Spare and his revelations about drug use were not necessarily a legal admission by Harry that he had used drugs. And I thought this was a ludicrous argument. Harry himself wrote the book, is in his name. He has admitted to widespread drug use. This is clear-cut evidence that would be accepted in any court. To argue that this is not admissible and that this is not evidence of Harry's drug taking, I think is completely
I think we can learn a bit from that now, though, can't we? Can't we learn a bit from that? Because why would you make the case, as in, why would they make the case, that Harry's drug taking in Spare is not definitive proof that he took drugs previously? Why would you make that case unless he had said on his visa application that he hadn't taken drugs, right? Because he wouldn't have to.
That's a very good case. And so this is why we're asking the Biden administration to release those records so the American people can see exactly what's in them and whether or not Harry lied. And lying on an immigration application, of course, is a criminal offense. It's a very serious matter here. And I think that, it's extraordinary the lengths to which the Biden presidency is going to protect these records from public release. Why are they doing that? This is, in my view, completely unacceptable. And there's a real shroud of secrecy surrounding Harry's application. Why is that? We want to know exactly what's in those records. Harry is a huge public figure who has openly talked about his drug use. So this is not a matter of privacy for Prince Harry.
Well, quite. Right, so then just to summarise all of this, then, we could be getting a result on this when, and playing that forward a bit, what could this result in? Harry be deported?
Yeah, so firstly, if the judge requests to see the records himself, that could be actually within the next few days or so. Then the judge will have a chance to review those records, and then the judge will decide, based upon what's in those records, whether to release them publicly. But you can be sure, if there's evidence of any lying, wrongdoing here on the part of Prince Harry with regard to his application, you're going to see those documents released. So we're moving a step closer towards that. Lying on an immigration application is a criminal offence. Normally in those situations, the individual involved would be removed from the United States.
Gosh. Well, watch this space. Hey, Niall, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. You've literally legged it from court to get back to your office to come on this show, so much appreciated.
My pleasure.
I would just really hope that you'll keep us updated for the very latest as and when you get it.
I definitely will do, Patrick. Thanks very much.
That's Niall Gardner there from the Heritage Foundation. Thank you. Wow, well, interesting developments. Look, coming up, has reality TV gone too far? So a new programme is giving us a glimpse into the lives of footballers' wives. Stay tuned for some pretty shocking clips. But next, tomorrow's newspaper front pages have just landed, so I will have all of Saturday morning's headlines for you. Don't you dare move.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time to take a look now at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Let's do it. It's the Eye. UK offers Russian officials British citizenship to defect and passed secrets to MI6. So escaped from Putin in a new life in the UK, basically. So we're offering them apparently British passports if they defect. Let's go to the Telegraph. Health Secretary gives backing to decriminalisation of abortion. Victoria Atkins says that her record speaks for itself as MPs prepared to vote on the first law change in decades. So the Health Secretary has indicated that she would back the decriminalisation. OK. Also, a picture story there of King Charles reading Get Well Soon cards. That's the Telegraph. We go to the Independent. It's one giant picture story, and it's a very gripping picture, I must say. Second anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. If Ukraine loses, the West is next, is their headline. They've also got the death toll of civilians, of injured, of soldiers there. And the picture is of, I'm obviously not getting the military term right here, but what looks like a massive cannon with fire coming out of it. The Daily Express. Esther, my joy... MPs can bring right to die law. Right, OK. Dame Esther Ranson's campaign to force a vote on assisted dying has taken a step forward. So the government are going to be voting on decriminalising abortion by the looks of this, and also assisted dying. So keeping them busy. Daily Mail, vile cat killer who went on to murder. Oxford Don's transgender daughter picked victim at random and was then betrayed by her escort lover who called the police. I mean, that's a headline that's got it all. It's got it all. Right, so those are your front pages. We will be discussing those in the next section with my wonderful panel, Director of Popular Conservatives Mark Littlewood, Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju, and ex-BBC political chief John Sargent. But the reason why we're going to be talking about something else now is specifically because Mark has got a vested interest in something that's coming up. But Nigel Farage has just given a speech at the Conservative Political Action Conference in the United States. You may also know, of course, that Liz Truss is there as well. So he's had this to say about the upcoming US presidential election.
And whilst I still have some reservations about the way in which the electoral system has been cleaned up state by state, and I still have some concerns about that, I'm still in no doubt that on November the 5th, we're going to get Donald Trump back elected and in the White House.
So he also gave his thoughts on the state of democracy here in the UK after those protests outside Parliament.
We see British politicians cowed, scared. They were even scared to leave the building on Wednesday and Thursday evenings because we've forgotten who we are, we've forgotten what we are, and we've allowed an extremist fringe to bully us and threaten our very democracy.
OK, so that's Nigel talking at CPAC. Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth has said that Rishi Sunak should have taken action, though, over former Prime Minister Liz Truss, because she spoke to Steve Bannon in the US. Now, according to Ashworth, she spread conspiracy theories about the deep state. She's been arguing that the left have infiltrated institutions, etc. I'm going to go to my panel on this now. Mark, bit of context here. So you are the director of the Popular Conservatives. Liz Truss is a massive part of that. Do you back her about this?
Yes, I think she's got quite an interesting insight, which, although she's a very different personality to Trump, it's a similar insight to Trump, which is, in essence, the system is somewhat rigged. I don't necessarily think that means there's a sort of diabolical conspiracy, but the state bureaucracy of the UK and the US, I think, is prone to a sort of leftist groupthink. And that is a sort of Truss analysis and a Trump analysis, and I definitely think they're onto something there. So, and I think the attraction for Trump, you know, is not everybody's cup of tea, and in many ways I think I would have preferred the Republicans to have found a different, rather less bombastic candidate. But the attraction is drain the swamp, knock over the apple cart, the system isn't working, the system's rigged. I don't agree with his claims about the election being a fraud last time round, but he has channeled substantial support in people who feel utterly disillusioned by the political institutional process of the United States of America. And I think that's beginning to come to the UK too. An annoyance at the way things happen and the way things are organised and what our institutions do and don't do.
John, do you think she should be losing the whip over this now? I mean, this is the allegation that she should be doing it. And she also backtracked on her actual support for Donald Trump a little bit, didn't she? I think.
Well, this evening, yes, she was asked several times on Channel 4 News whether she was supporting Trump, and she wouldn't answer. So I think the whole thing is rather strange. I think what's worrying, of course, is that she seems not to accept that her short period as Prime Minister was a complete shambles, that in all sorts of ways, she and her colleagues, her close colleagues, Grace Carting and one of those, just got things completely wrong. And it took an enormous amount of effort by the Bank of England and others to sort of sort things out. And eventually, Tory MPs had to, embarrassingly for them, get rid of her. So the idea that she then says, well, of course, this is all a conspiracy, I must say, doesn't strike me as being terribly true or terribly relevant.
Go on, John, your views.
I think she's absolutely delusional. You know, we all saw what happened, and, you know, she's kind of trying to blame it on the deep state. Tell that to everybody whose mortgage basically tripled after her shenanigans. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's almost as if I never really know what to get with Liz Truss, because obviously at first she was Lib Dem, then she was Conservative, she was a Remainer, then she was an, you know, ardent Brexiteer. Who the hell is she? That's what I'm trying to figure out, and it just seems as if now, again, another one that's clutching at straws to stay relevant.
Well, I think she's making the point that the head of the Bank of England can't really be sacked, but a Prime Minister can. And, you know, ultimately the Bank of England made mistakes and essentially what brought her down would be the allegation, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to suggest that Liz Truss didn't make any errors in her 49 days in office. She moved too fast, too quickly. She didn't take a party with her. Her cabinet was nearly exclusively people who had supported her in the leadership contest. I think there's only one Sunakite. She tried to do far too much, far too quickly, didn't explain it, hadn't rolled the pitch, as they say, a string of errors. But my concern is this. If you were to imagine a Prime Minister who had not made all of the missteps that Liz Truss made, had carried their party with them, had got everything sequenced properly, I still think it is damn difficult to get taxes down, spending under control and deregulation happening in this country because the system is rigged against it. That does not excuse Liz Truss. I'm not suggesting she made no mistakes. She did make a good number of mistakes. But even a faultless Prime Minister trying to bring those things about, I think, would have a tough going. And you're right, Patrick. Why is the Governor of the Bank of England still in place when the inflation target's 2%? How long can you fail to hit that target and just sort of
So there
shrug
is
your
a
shoulders?
deep state. I mean, the argument there is a deep state, and it's not dangerous right-wing conspiracy theory to say it.
No, but I think that you've got to be vaguely credible, and she's not very credible because she was, frankly, the worst Prime Minister that anyone can remember in the modern era.
Has she not been proved slightly right, though, now, on certain things? It was just the fact that maybe she moved too quickly and there was a big backlash, or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think she did try and do too much, too fast, and there was a sort of shock and awe approach about it. It was a sort of, let's have a, let's get rid of the top rate of income tax. That will sort of gain a bit of, attention. So it should have been a lot slower.
With Liz Truss now is that I would have a lot more respect for her if she actually said something that was similar to say, I still stand by what I was doing, but I take some accountability. But all of a sudden, it's everybody else's fault. It's basically gaslighting the rest of us because, it's the deep state that did it. So it's the deep state that made our mortgages triple. It's the deep state that did everything to the economy. Take some accountability, and then maybe people will start to have some respect.
I'm not sure how deep
I think the other thing is looking, obviously, the time I remember best, really, is the time that Margaret Thatcher was in charge. It took her 7 years to get the trade union reforms that she wanted. 7 years. So the idea that you just simply arrive within a few weeks and, wow, that's it, it's just ridiculous.
Just quickly, the other stuff that Nigel was saying there was that he firmly believes that come November the 5th, we're going to have a second term of President Trump. Do you think we will?
Yes, I think that's the likelihood. Look, a lot could change between now and then. Trump is a few points ahead in the opinion polls. The nature of the electoral system in America means that Trump could probably lose the popular vote by 2 or 3% and still prevail in the Electoral College. So if he's a few percent ahead, it looks like he'll prevail. I'm still not completely convinced that President Biden will be the Democrat candidate. That could completely throw things up in the air. But more likely than not, Trump will be elected president in November, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Mark said. I certainly think that Biden might stand down.
I don't see how he can. Literally don't see how he can't stand
down. I think there's plenty of time for him to do that. Yeah. It will change everything in terms of who stands against him. And remember, you've got this porn star case coming in about why did he give her £120,000.
This is Trump, not Biden. This is Trump, not Biden.
This is Trump, not Biden.
Just for the sake of clarity, that makes
sense, wouldn't it? For those of you who think there's a porn star involved, Biden, no, not as far as we know.
Not that's made it to court, that's for sure. Do you think we'll get Trump?
Potentially, I hope not. But also, it's been such a long time since everything with the insurrection. I think maybe some people have forgotten, but actually when it gets into really heavy election period, I think it'll be really drilled into the American public's, minds.
We talk about a Teflon candidate. It was unbelievable. I mean, a fraction of the court cases thrown at Trump would destroy any other politician.
He just
and it seems
keeps
to make him
going.
stronger. Yeah.
Keeps going, and we're talking big stuff, massive stuff here, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, and it just washes over the guy.
Incredible.
So what you like about him, but he's got resolve. He's got resolve. Right, now look, coming up, more of those front pages. I'm also going to be asking you whether or not you think that reality TV has gone too far, because we've been given a glimpse into the lives of footballers' wives, and I mean, to say some of it is quite shocking is a bit of an understatement, and we will take a look at a cringeworthy example of mansplaining that's doing the rounds online. It's Patrick, Christys tonight. We're on GB News.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
And
are
remember,
being
a lot of people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Piers. And, the profits... I think on Clarkins Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
Right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. I'm all for green protests, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead.
The Tata Steel thing.
Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. Lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. But sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
All right, more front pages for you now. OK, this is the Mirror first. King and Tonic. Charles moved and amused by 7,000 cars from around the world. That is the royal health battle. The Sun. Mel B exclusive. I was so broke I went to Lidl to save cash. What's wrong with Lidl? There's nothing wrong with Lidl, is there?
No, nothing wrong at all.
I mean...
Very first world problem.
Very first world problem. Also, why is it on the front page? Does anyone else think that's a bit weird, that?
Very
on the front page, yeah? Probably a bit more news in town now. Does anyone here shop at Lidl, John? You're a waitress, man.
No, well, I'd like to go to Lidl's for some things. I mean, what were they doing which I took a fancy to? Not the champagne. One of those things that you
I like the mystery aisle in the middle of Lidl. Where you just don't know what you're going to get. You go in for, like, a bit of ham or something. You come out with a lawn trimmer and some scuba gear, which I think is fantastic.
Like a bit of Aldi as well.
Aldi's good.
Copies.
Yes, indeed. Right, well, let's just whiz ourselves over to a couple of viral clips that have been doing the rounds, because I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of those front pages are a little bit naff. But professional golfer Georgia Ball, great name for a golfer, has gone viral on TikTok this week over an exceptionally cringeworthy spot of mansplaining from a male golfer who was watching her technique. Look, I just warn you in advance, you might not be able to make it through the entirety of this clip without just eating your fist through cringe, but here we go.
Excuse me. What you're doing there, you shouldn't be doing that. You should have been playing golf for 20 years. What you need to do is follow through a lot quicker than what you're doing there right now. than that anyway, Graham.
Thank you for your advice.
So just to reiterate, she is a professional golfer, and that was a random man at a driving range there, teaching her how to do it. I mean, I'll go to you first. Does this kind of stuff happen a lot?
Yeah, it does, actually.
Well, let me explain to you why. Right now.
Exactly.
Go on, no, this must be the plight of the woman.
Not as extreme. I'm not saying that every week, you know, you go out and someone's kind of showing you what to do, but I don't know. I think some men just take pride in being like, oh, let me show you the real way of doing it. Or let me tell you what this really means. But it's even more hilarious that she's actually more professional. She should be the one giving him tips.
Yeah.
It's so weird, but it does happen. It is cringe. It's not like a huge thing, but it's just a bit like, really?
Yeah.
Really, mate?
Hasn't she also egged him on a bit, you know, not revealing how skillful she is?
I don't know about that, John. I don't know. She should have gone out to have a professional... Right. Now, look, we've got another clip to bring you, all right? So move out of the way, Wagatha Christie. Amazon are back at it again. This is the latest documentary series. It's called Married to the Game, and it's going absolutely viral. It's about it's about footballers, but also footballers' wives, crucially. Just have a look at some of these clips.
This is actually, if you actually think about it, actually technically a bigger move for me.
It's part of the game, innit?
Yeah.
You're not going to propose to me today, are you?
No.
OK. So then I can put this one on here. There we go. Just in case. It's free.
It's going to stay free.
Excuse me?
It's going to stay free.
What, today?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Oh, shock, as footballers do not treat their female partners with maximum respect. There we go. Right, well, look, we've just about got time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. All right, Mark, who is your Greatest Britain?
I'm going to doff my cap to James Cleverly, who sacked the Border Force Chief David Neal, I believe his name is. Good on the Home Secretary. If functionaries get out of their lane, then I think they are rightly fired. This was for an unauthorised briefing to the newspapers. Rightly fired. Good on the Home Secretary for doing it. David Neal's therefore my jackass.
Greatest Britain, Janet?
Mine is Prince William. I think that it was really courageous for him to speak out about Gaza earlier this week. You know, obviously he was naturally going to get some backlash for it, but it shows that it actually has some principle, and I think that his late mother would be proud of him. OK, John, Greatest Britain?
An honorary one. Alexei Navalny's mother. Amazing, isn't it? That there she was, goes up to the penal colony and reveals that they want a private funeral for her son and that she's got to give it, otherwise it'll be behind closed doors. That's a very brave thing to do, and given her feelings now at this moment, it must have been terribly difficult.
All right, today's Greatest Britain is Navalny's mother, so there we go. Now, literally, we have 60 seconds left. Jackass, quickly.
Well, I said David Neal. I mean, the Border Force Chief, he's the person who's been the jackass, rightly fired.
Don't like that guy. Go on, Johnny, quickly.
Mine's, of course, Liz Truss for turning loopy and blaming the deep state for her own problems.
There you go, you two got a foot like that. Go on, John.
The Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, for causing complete chaos at Westminster.
It's Lindsay Hoyle, obviously it is. It's a bad week for Lindsay and a bad week for the rest of us as well. Look, thank you very, very much. I've had a wonderful time this evening. I've really enjoyed having you all on the panel, and thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening and tuning in over the course of the week. Just a couple of little reminders for you. You can go back to us, rewind it, whether or not you're watching us on one of those fancy television screens or, of course, on YouTube. A couple of highlights of the show. We did have the Happy Mondays, definitely not cocaine dealer. We also had Shamima Begum's family lawyer and the bloke who went to meet her as well out in Syria. I'll be back next week, Monday from 9 p.m. It's Headliners next. Have a great...
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It'll be a chilly start to the weekend. There will be some early sunshine though, but a risk of showers developing in the afternoon. Low pressure's been in charge through today. That will slowly start to fill, bringing us a slightly more settled evening and Saturday. So any showers through the day will tend to fade away through the course of the night, but they will still persist across some western coasts and across the far southeast as well, where it could be quite breezy overnight. night. Elsewhere, though, it will be a clear and calm and dry night, so temperatures will drop away, so it's likely to be quite a cold start to the day on Saturday. So frost, potentially some icy patches, and also some mist and fog by tomorrow morning. That should lift and clear by mid-morning, and many areas will see a dry and bright day through Saturday. The best of the sunshine will definitely be through the morning. Cloud will bubble up into lunchtime and into the afternoon, allowing a few showers to develop. These should be fairly few and far between, and they will be quite light if you do get caught in one. In the sunshine, it will be feeling fairly pleasant as well with those light winds. Will be another cold start to the day on Sunday, but across northern areas it should stay dry and bright through much of the day. In the south, though, quite a different story with some quite persistent wet weather set to arrive across southern areas of England, possibly into parts of South Wales too. Turns drier more widely once again on Monday before further wet weather arrives in the north on Tuesday. See you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions. We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Headliners is up next, but first our top stories. And we start with some breaking news. The Prime Minister says the UK government is prepared to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes until Ukraine prevails over Russia. Ahead of the second anniversary of President Putin's illegal invasion, Rishi Sunak is calling on the free world to renew our determination and show tyranny will never triumph. Last month, the government signed a 10-year agreement on security cooperation with Ukraine and increased its total support to £12 billion. Well, Just Stop Oil says it has disrupted Labour MP Annalise Dodds' fundraising dinner in Oxford this evening.
The Tories have absolutely smeared my future with oil licences. That's why we see we don't want any new licences. But that's not enough.
Well, a coalition of groups, including Oxford Palestine Society, carried out the protest at the NEF Istanbul restaurant. They demanded the Labour frontbencher promise to leave the Labour Party within 6 months if it failed to cancel all oil and gas licences granted after 2021. Another protester from Action Against War Crimes demanded Dodds say when the Labour Party would stand up for those in Gaza. Police officers could be seen responding to the protest. In the US, a high-altitude balloon has reportedly been detected flying over the continental United States. US officials have told news outlets it was spotted by military aircraft over Colorado in the west of the country at an altitude of between 43,000 and 45,000 feet. It's said to be drifting eastwards in the jet stream. Although its origin and purpose is still unknown, it's not thought to present a threat. The sighting comes a year after a Chinese spy balloon flew over the US for several days. Staying in the States, and Nigel Farage says the 2024 US election affects the safety of the world. The GB News presenter was speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference just outside of Washington, D.C., where he urged delegates to support Donald Trump. He cited the UK's recent pro-Palestine protests and claimed an extremist fringe is now threatening our democracy.
We see British politicians cowed, scared. They were even scared to leave the building on Wednesday and Thursday evenings because we've forgotten who we are, we've forgotten what we are, and we've allowed an extremist fringe to bully us and threaten our very democracy. And that is why we need strong leaders. It's why we need leaders of conviction. It's why you in America and we in the world need Trump back in that White House.
And finally, the King has been pictured looking through thousands of cards sent by well-wishers. Sitting at a desk in Buckingham Palace, King Charles can be seen laughing at one card, which shows a disgruntled dog recovering from treatment. The King has received 7,000 messages of support from around the world since his cancer diagnosis. Many have also shared their own experiences of cancer, with one telling him, "Remain positive and don't let it get you down." For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, as promised, it's our headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Nick Dixon, taking you through tomorrow's top stories for the next hour. And I'm joined by Zelensky shill Leo Kearse, there he is, and controlled opposition Francis Foster. I took those intros from trolls on your X account. Sorry, guys.
Nice. Well, that's not the worst that's been said about me.
No, not today. How are you feeling, Francis? You all right? You ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to be controlled in opposition.
Yeah, you get that, don't you? Because your podcast does too well, so people say, well, you must be controlled opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also because I look a bit Jewish as well, mate.
I didn't want to say it. Let's kick off then and look at Saturday's front pages. So the Daily Telegraph have Health Secretary gives backing to decriminalisation of abortion. We're tackling that in a moment. The Daily Mail, vile cat killer who went on to murder. The Express, Esther My Joy MPs can bring in right to die law. The UK offers Russian officials British citizenship to defect and pass secrets to MI6. The Mirror, King and Tonic. And finally, the Daily Star, Mamma Mia, which is about spaghetti bolognese, and we'll tackle that in a moment. So let's start with the Telegraph, Francis.
So the Telegraph has gone with the story about abortion restrictions could be eased in a historic vote next month. So it is a crime in this country to abort a child after 24 weeks of pregnancy, an unborn child after 24 weeks of pregnancy. And the majority of MPs now believe that actually this should be revoked. It should be decriminalised. And I think it's 1 in 4 MPs believe that it should be decriminalised. Now, more men than women, actually, I'll change that, more women than men believe that it should be decriminalised.
What do babies think about it?
Yes. What do you mean?
Well, this is 24-week-old fetuses. I mean, I think abortion, if you abort, I think the age limit in most places is considered to be around 15 weeks, which is a sensible limit. 24 weeks, man, this isn't like a cluster of cells anymore. This thing's got, it's full, it's got all its fingers, it's fully formed, it's pretty big. It's got a TikTok account. Yeah. It's, it's already vaping. So, we need to, this is a terrible idea. This is essentially killing, a baby that that's viable outside the womb.